Welcome back for our final section on Talk to Sullivan. That's me, Stan Sullivan, my co-host.
Chief Steve.
Former Police Chief Steve Davis, and also from the far reaches of the universe, from freedomradio.us, we have
Brent Johnson.
Brent Johnson. And, of course, our favorite all-time nice guy, Mr. Smiley himself, Dr. Alan Keyes, who has a blog that is worthwhile of being one of your favorites, at Loyal to Liberty. Actually, that's his Twitter address. It's loyaltoliberty.com. Correct, Dr. Keyes? We have Alan?
That's correct, Stan. Thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. I want to start with some projections. Are you ready? 50% unemployment. We're already there for black youth and halfway there for minorities in this country. 90% deflation in the stock market. We're not there yet. 100% inflation, and even though we're being told inflation is at 2 or 3%, inflation in reality is probably more like 10 or 12%. They just hide it from us. But the economic data, and of course you have, as I understand, a PhD in economics or something like that, the economic data is not bad. It's not very bad. It's not very, very bad. It is downright depression-oriented. Am I overstating?
Well, Stan, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not an economist, so I want to say that right out. I studied government, and as part of that, spent some time trying to get a basic handle on economics, which led me, by the way, to reject most of what was being taught when I was in university, since they were all Keynesians, and it never really made sense to me, even in terms of the basic analysis that led to much of what they thought we ought to learn. But leave that aside. I think that we are suffering the consequences, though, of having lived all these decades with the shibboleths of Keynesian economics. And the consequence is, of course, that having put all their eggs in this basket, as we now face a situation where, having in the years since Reagan left office kind of unleashed, whether openly or in crypto fashion, the demons of this kind of government, and especially coming to a head in the first decade of the 21st century, culminating, of course, in this orgy of spending and debt under Obama, we're seeing the devastating consequences of following an understanding of economics that essentially neglects the real facts of human economic life and motivation. And the result of that, of course, is that can they stand here now and say, well, everything that we've said about economics is all discredited by what's happening, and so let's honestly get on with the business. You think they're going to do that, Stan? Because I don't. And so the end result is that they lie to us now. They cook the books, they change the way they keep the numbers on unemployment and what they count in terms of the goods for inflation. And of course, you also have, by the way, things going on that conspire on the shelves themselves to keep the less observant folks from noticing that they're paying more now and getting less. So things are repackaged and sold as if you're still getting what you used to get. It looks pretty much the same, but you're not getting the same amount. You're just paying the same price for it, and sometimes more. So in all kinds of ways, yeah, I think inflation is being camouflaged. I think especially in terms of unemployment, the fact that we are going through a period that is devastating for the most vulnerable communities, like the black community, that is really, really bad for everybody else. But what do you expect when we have been also in a period when, in spite of all they claim they're doing, with stimulus packages and so forth and so on, you drive about the country and it looks as if the flow of capital resources for the job-creating cutting edge in America, which is that small and medium-sized business sector, is terrible. And I hear it everywhere I go, and anecdotes and other things, that people just can't get loans. And yet all this money, supposedly, was being put there so that this wouldn't happen. What has, of course, happened, whether you're talking openly with Obama or in other ways, is that the cronies of the bureaucrats and politicians who are playing the gatekeeper as they strangle the resources of this country, that have gone out to their buddies and going out to the little cliques that favor their interests and that do not, at this time, I think, Stan, favor the best interests of the American people and their economic strength or even their survival. So I don't think you're exaggerating, no. And I think that the sad thing is that folks are approaching this next election as if they are going to ignore the truth of the whole of the last 10 years and more, which is that this is not just a matter of bad old leftists and Democrats. It's a matter of an approach and understanding of economics and government that is sadly pervasive amongst our elites across the partisan divide, and that sacrifices both our sovereignty and the real economic interests of our people in order to serve the edifices of power that cater to the cliques that will establish that elite power in a world no longer respectful of government of, by, and for the people, and of the interests in the people's welfare that goes along with having such a government. I think we're going through a time that is truly, in that sense, Stan, revolutionary. And it has this economic aspect, but that is just part of an overall picture that is transitioning us from this great American experiment in liberty and respect for the common good of the people into a return, a retrogressive, far from progressive, but retrogressive devolution toward a return to government of, by, and for the few at the expense of the society as a whole, so that essentially people become cannon fodder for the interests, welfare, wealth, well-being, and power of a few at the expense of all the rest. This is what our country was founded to stop. But unhappily, this is the era in which it seems a big effort is being made to end the American exception and put us back on the same track of tyranny by the few that human beings have been on from time immemorial.
Well said. In fact, there was an article that says over $1 trillion has been given by this administration to its cronies, and I think that they're understating it by half at least. All right, we have a caller with the question. Let's take that question. Caller, what is your question? Hey.
Hi, and Alan Keyes, this is Guy Stevenson from Iowa, and while you're on the topic of economics, I'd like to ask Alan a question, and Brett as well. But I'd like to know what kind of economic principles places human capital, and again, I'm emphasizing human capital, as our nation's greatest natural resource. I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but I'm reminded of Dr. Alan Keyes' statement to South Africa and apartheid, when the apartheid considered their populace much like human capital is today, and same with the plantations and even the concentration camps of Nazi Germany. I'm only emphasizing this because this is a keynote piece of architecture on Mitt Romney's and the Republican Party's national platform.
All right, good question. Let's get Dr. Keyes to respond, and then Brent. Dr. Keyes.
Well, I think that if I could have my druthers in terms of the premise and principles on which our approach to economics would be based, it would be to return to the original understanding of economics, to see the powerhouse of economics in the family unit and in the individuals that compose it, and to understand that the real welfare, quote unquote, of that unit does not lie in the income that is generated by its activities, but by the increase in wealth that over time can be represented by those activities. So it's not only a question of what everybody's obsessed with these days, how much money flows in, whether from the government or any other source, and if you have enough income from whatever source, that's fine. No, if your potential as a producer, individually, as a family, as a community, is being destroyed by the way in which that money comes in, then you are effectively being dehumanized, in my view, in an economic sense. How do you avoid that? By putting the emphasis on real wealth creation. And real wealth creation is measured in the end not by how much people make, but by how much they end up owning. Now, obviously, if you're going to put an emphasis on individual ownership and ownership by way of those the natural association of the family and enterprises that then grow on that concept, you are moving away from the socialist understanding of collectivized ownership represented by the dominant instrumentality of the government. I think that latter, it's the socialism, the totalitarianism, whether, by the way, it's corporate socialism like the fascists and the Nazis, or bureaucratic and party socialism like the communists, it's wrong because it takes the most important economic resource, which in my view is the individual in the context of natural family life, and it destroys it essentially, substituting bureaucratic means, and whether corporate or government, for what ought to be the God-ordained means for increasing and guaranteeing wealth. This is why over the years, too, as a final thought, I've always seen the most important aim of real economic policy would be to not just increase the distribution of income and all the stuff they talk about, but to increase the actual stake that each and every individual has in the community. Things like employee stock ownership, expanded capital ownership, the view that you can implement an approach that is going to create a community of interests by, at the end of the day, giving everybody a sense that the end result of their productivity is going to be something that lifts them up, not just in a temporary sense in terms of their income, but in an overall sense in terms of the wealth base that they have and can pass along to their children.
Well said. All right, Brent?